What is density for you?
It's, how did you put it? The amount of units or the number of units in a given area. That's a very wide definition, I suppose. In density goes different ways, I suppose. For our projects, it really depends on what the main target is. I mean, density for density's sake doesn't serve any purpose, I find. Density works, sometimes you need density to make a project work. So you don't build, for instance, the Library Birmingham for an area which doesn't have enough people to visit it. So the building has been designed for 10,000 people a day, which is quite a lot. And that makes it the busiest library in Europe, as people say. So yeah, density is not necessarily a target. It's more of a tool, I suppose, to create and to help create.
Mm-hmm. I enjoy this kind of highly dense and sort of more or less self-regulated and sometimes illegal settlements that could be referred to as composts in a city. Something which is not very controlled and that is like compost itself. It's like producing some sort of organic energy. Probably most fruitful topsoil for the urban development is coming outside of control. And those places can be very dense and very productive.
And do you think that open public space and density is a contradiction?
I don't know, like open public space is, it can be so in so many ways. I enjoy seeing these kind of settings where people are self-regulating their settlements and making their own rules, kind of in very organic ways. Sometimes slums, sometimes other illegal settlements, sometimes even turning into legal settlements, a new kind of urbanism. How that is related to open public space, I can't really say. I think the best public space in a city is nature.
For culture facilities, you need some density to make sure that you have enough people visiting the theatres or whatever cultural facilities you have elsewhere. You don't need necessarily one centre with cultural facilities or so. It could be spread. So if you look at London, you have loads of different neighbourhoods with their own little centres where things happen, and they'll only work if there's enough people to support it. So restaurants and bars and retail works with the amount of people in the area. If it's too little people, too few, then yeah, your shops go out of business, your restaurants are not full, and therefore it doesn't thrive. So to have this economical growth, you need to keep a certain amount of people.
Yeah. Density has been born in places where nature can provide higher density of people, say some fruitful river valleys in like Taipei, where you have mountains on three sides pouring down topsoil all the time, and you have a flooding river, very fertile. Also, nature is protecting from the straight hits of the typhoons, and you can use the river for transportation. So people have found it can support masses of people, and that's the first generation city where the high density urbanism or some sort of urban villages in straight connection and dependent on nature, and that's it's a natural place. I couldn't have that kind of thing in Lapland.
Yeah, so what is density from your approach, from your point of view? And is there good density, is there bad density?
Density is just a vast issue. From the point of view of density, most people think density is about buildings and about people. And actually what I'm interested in is how, when you create a space, how that affects the density of people and buildings and trees and bats and bees and traffic. So when we make a decision about creating a place, what is that decision going to be about in terms of density of what? And how does that affect people? So I'm also interested in how density of the built form affects our mental health and well-being. So if we've got lots and lots of fast food places, and the housing is very dense, then we're going to get more obesity, more what they call non-communicable diseases like heart disease, diabetes, cancer. So when we think about density, we shouldn't just think about the units per metre or acre or whatever. We should think about all the relationships between a dense space in terms of buildings and people, and how that affects nature, how it affects transport, and how it affects our health.
There's an awful lot of theory about what density is, what's good density, what's bad density. My point was really that cities are generally, successful cities are generally quite dense in terms of they are, a lot of people living in very close networks, and there is a kind of spatial dimension to that, so that there tends to be patterns of living that we've experienced for centuries, if not thousands of years, that seem to work. Cities have continued and sustained large bodies of communities. But when they get too big, or they get too spaced out, or they start going outside certain hard to define parameters, things start perhaps go wrong. And the things that can go wrong can be to do with sort of slum settlements where health issues are a real problem. Political issues can be a problem. But on the other side, the density allows for human networks, human communities to operate in ways that seem to be incredibly fertile. They perform social networks that support society, supports community. Sustain good education, good social networks that help people get on, economically develop, and so on. So I'm not saying that all of this agglomeration of the developing world into big settlements is bad by any means. It's a good thing. It has the potential for enormous good, but it's happening at a rate and in ways that are out of control because it's happening sort of automatically, organically. And in some countries there's no planning and there's no system to try and deal with it. Other countries it's slightly better.
We did a study of what people thought density was. Planners, members of the RRBA, we did a survey of 102 people, and there was not one person or not one consistent view on what low density was, what medium density was, and high density. It varied. Low density varied from 1 house per hectare to 70. Low density, high density was 70 houses per hectare to 400. So people didn't have any idea of density. The government used to have a sort of recommended density of 30 homes per hectare. That this new government got rid of that in the building regs a couple of years ago. So now nobody knows or uses any measure of density.
The other point I wanted to make was that that we're entering a period where the scale of it is unprecedented. The scale of size of cities and the types of architecture that we're building to accommodate these has gone to a sort of a level of density which we've never experienced before, and we're therefore in kind of unknown territory in terms of what that might mean. What will that be like for people living there? What will it mean for the city as a whole?